speaking ability too, I might add. So anyhow, to introduce Marty Walker here from the class of '65, we have his son Sergeant Jeff Walker, who's going to. He's a sergeant in both the Army and the police, so he's a sergeant.
I'm Jeff Walker. It's an honor to introduce my dad, Marty Walker. Pretty cool guy. Kind of James Bond, Jason Bourne, Bob Vila, Mr. GQ, all wrapped in one. So, my hero, my dad. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate that introduction, and your Christmas gift will be extremely large this year. First off, I would like to ask I'm not going to ask you to stand up, but would those veterans in the audience please raise your hand? Thank you for your question. Thank you. Just an administrative remark. I want you to know that the Russians had no input on this presentation. I think I need to start from the beginning. And that was when I was 17 years old in Luther Crocker's class, sitting next to a big fella. And he had this brochure, kind of a cantilever brochure like this that said Marine Corps on it. And I asked Bill Finkel, I said, Bill, let me look at that brochure. We were almost ready to graduate. And he let me look at it, and I looked in this brochure and I said, my gosh, look at these guys. Didn't have many gals at that time. I said, look at these guys. They're all so well dressed, and look at the food on these plates. This camp is for me. I had no idea what the military was like. In fact, my desires at that time were just to get out of school and have fun. I really didn't have any vocational, pursuits. So, shortly thereafter, I went downtown to the Federal Building. And I went in this office, and this long, sort of a shadow box office. At the end of the office, there was this desk. And all along the walls were these great posters. Marine Corps is just absolutely the best at advertising. And this gunnery sergeant said, can I help you? So I said, I'm interested in joining. He said, well, when would you like to leave? Well, hey, I graduated last week. I want to get out of here. I want something to do. I said, well, this is Monday. And I said, how about Friday? He said, well, can't do that. So I said, okay. So I started to walk away. And he said, come on back here. Friday, I was on that plane to San Diego. My career started then. But one of the reasons my career started was because of this man. Harry Klutz. Harry Klutz taught me that there was more in the world than Kansas City. So without Harry's guidance, at that time, I probably would still be in Kansas City. But over the years, I realized that there was a lot in life. And my partner, which is here, Stefan, of 49 years and 5 months, has been with me the whole time almost. So eventually, when I got to boot camp and after that, I found out that, golly gee, there are people making these decisions that are really stupid. I can make these kind of decisions. So I went to the office and I said, hey, I want to be one of these officers. He said, oh yeah, right, sure. You need a college degree. And I thought, well, maybe I need a college degree if I'm going to do something besides just, menial things. And I embarked on a quest to get a college degree. And after a couple of months, I decided that going to night school, I would be on Social Security by the time I got a degree. So I petitioned the Marine Corps to send me back to school, which they did. And they have provided all my education from bachelor's to master's. So my partner here and I, we embarked on an adventure of a lifetime for the past 35 years. I was assigned to Africa, West Africa, in 1995 while we were in Japan. I've spent a lot of my life overseas. And West Africa is this area right here. It's about the size of the United States. It's a very, very large area. These are the countries that I was responsible for the security of your embassy. And you'll see some of these have actually changed names, like Zaire now is called the New Republic of the Congo. One thing you find out about African countries is that when you're elected president, unlike our country, it's generally for life. That's how they see it. Some of those presidents will last 20 to 30 years. And I'll get into that in a little later. The Marine security guards, those are the ones you see in the movies that are out in front of the embassy in their dress blues and look real sharp. There are 3 layers of defense for an embassy. You have the outer layer, which is generally the country's military. You have the fence wall around the embassy. That is the general local police force. And then internal to the embassy, you have the Marines. And there are not that many Marines in each embassy. So, as you can see, the Marines and the mission of the Marines there are to protect U.S. property and the interior of the embassy. And right now we have a little more than 120 embassies, but there's more than 120 countries. Not all countries have Marines assigned to the embassy. It's based on the value of the country, in other words, what we see our interests in that country happen to be, and the security of the country itself. If you have a country that has security problems, a threat to the embassy staff, you will probably have Marines there. A complement of 5 Marines, that could be 5 males with 1 or 2 females. Used to be all male, but now it's both. Some are larger, like say Cairo, Egypt has over 30. But generally they're 5, sometimes a few more. They're headquartered in Quantico, Virginia, which is about 45 miles south of Washington, D.C., on the Potomac. And the State Department and the Marine Corps manage these 1,000+ Marines that do nothing but provide for a 3-year period, security for the embassies. They're screened very carefully, both psychological, physical, and to make sure they are going to represent you at the embassy. That's why they all look so sharp. Marines work for the ambassador. The ambassador sets the tone for what type of security is used. As an example, in South America a few years ago, the ambassador was threatened, so he told the Marines, when you come with me and escort me, I want you to have machine guns. So they would have machine guns. But most ambassadors use the soft touch. And you've heard this before. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Do you know where that came from?
Teddy Roosevelt.
No, it came from Africa. That is an African tribal saying that Theodore Roosevelt picked up and used. But that is what most ambassadors do. We live right here on the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Abidjan is right there. Most of these Western and African countries have their capital, or at least their commercial capital, on the ocean. So they have a way to get products in and out of Africa. Even some of the others that are more inward have a little strip that comes down to have a port so they can get items. Say again? So, I thought somebody said something. So that is more of a larger area of my area of responsibility. So, in 1995, I went from this shopping center, this area right here, in the Far East, to this area. And this is a marché, a typical African marché. Now, all the slides I'm going to show you, these photos I'm going to show you, are not of big cities. They only have a few big cities in Africa. Maybe 2 or 3 areas, excluding South Africa, have buildings that are over 5 stories tall. So, this is a typical marché, and you can see the water behind you, behind them. Duties and responsibilities that I visited or had to visit the detachment and embassy of those countries I had responsibility for every 6 months. Once every 6 months to make sure that they were doing the appropriate thing. And also I coordinated with the host country, with the ambassador, and with the Marines to make sure that everything was fine. Some of my minuscule duties were to go out and check the market out, to see where the Marines were buying their food, to go to the barber shop, see where they get their hair cut, and experience what they experience to make sure it's appropriate. Who was in charge of these Marines? Not an officer, but an enlisted man or woman. Very trustworthy. A real heady responsibility that you have in your power the security of that embassy and represent you, the United States of America. So, I ensured that the relations were acceptable to the host country, the State Department, and the Marine Corps. And also, we would evacuate nationals. So if a country went down, a president turned over and they didn't like it, they uprised, we had to evacuate those Americans and other citizens from other countries occasionally out of that country to get them out of harm's way, which is a big deal. And I'll tell you why it's a big deal. It's a big deal not only to get this amount of people and equipment and ships, planes stationed to get the citizens out, but also it's a shock to the citizens because overnight you are told you're leaving, pack your items and let's go. What about my dog? Your dog stays. My dog's been with me for 10 years. Your dog stays. That is a shock to the family. And you may never return. What are you going to carry? What you can put in 2 small bags. And some of these expats have lived in these countries for years. Some of them are contractors, etc. But to come into your house or to get the information that if you want to leave, you don't have to leave, but generally you do, that you are going to leave and you've got 2 hours to pack all your stuff, say goodbye, and meet at this particular place, and we are going to evacuate you. Maybe, most likely, never to return. So, it's a big deal. The other thing was to visit Peace Corps sites. This really, visiting these sites to see these young men and women in their 20s, right out of college generally, doing a fantastic job with almost nothing. And a Peace Corps is only a 2-year tour, can extend for a 3rd year, but they do a fantastic job in a very hostile, sometimes austere, almost all the time austere atmosphere in Africa. And assess the country's status. Now, I put that in there because part of my responsibility was to look around, to check LZs, landing zones for helicopters to evacuate people if we had to look at our arterial areas, roadways, docks that could support ships, and report this back to our country. Transportation. How did I get to these places? Now you notice there's one thing up there besides planes and boats and cars and trucks that you don't see it. Anybody see what that is? What?
Walking.
Well, you did a lot of that too, but what else? You just got it here. Trains. No trains. But you say, well, wait a minute. When the Brits were there and the French were there, they had trains. Those guys run on, timetables in their countries. Because as soon as the colonialists left, the Africans decided, we don't need trains, but we need those rails. We can use those rails, and those rails were taken up just like that. And so was the telephone wire and the electric wire. In some countries, it disappeared faster than you could put it down. Because they know no better. They don't understand what that really means to the country. So, one thing also you'll notice, there are no American airlines there. These are all local airlines. Some of you have never heard of Air Afrique, Ghana Air, Russian contract planes, Nigerian Air, Ethiopian Air. These were countries that had 1 or 2 airplanes that may or may not fly. Or may not fly for very long. Now, none of these would land in the United States. They're not FAA approved, and they could not land. They would not let them, they just say, hey, don't even bother to come. So that's how I flew in most of these airlines. Boat, ferries, motorboats, and canoes were used to get from place to place. You say, well, where'd all the roads go in Africa? As soon as you left the main metropolitan area, the roads disappeared. And I mean literally disappeared into small little trails or dirt roads. We also used cars, trucks, and armored vehicles, which were a Chevy Suburban converted. This is one of the planes we used. This is a U.S. plane, small 2-engine plane. When it was available, we would use that. One of the things you may not understand, you see the Marines in uniform at the embassy. But I did not wear a uniform. I wore civilian clothes the whole time I was there. This airplane was at Liberia. This is a Russian contract airplane. After the uprising, the locals decided that this plane would not ever go again, and so they blew it up. This happened quite frequently in Africa. Thus, most U.S. airlines would not go to Africa. Pan Am was the last American airline that flew out of Africa, and that ended in the early 90s with the uprising there. Boats, used a lot. These are the type of boats, small little outboard motor, and they would go across these rivers from country to country. Sometimes the road would stop, and that's how you got there. This is an LPH, a landing, helicopter landing ship. You see the helicopters over there. That's my partner and I, and we're getting ready to do something off the coast. That's my uniform that I wore. This picture was taken during the evacuation of Liberia, and that's what I did. Also, transportation vans. We call vans, they call taxis. And believe me, they pack them in. And sometimes you have to take that taxi. They don't seem to mind. A ferry. This over here is the Congo. This over here is Zaire, now the new Republic of Congo. And to go from one place to the other, you get on this ferry and you go across. And it's a very taxing sometimes trip because it takes a long time for that to happen. Housing. Where did we live? Where do people live in Africa? I mean, we all think different ways of how people live in some of their areas. So, this was our house. We did not live in what you call an embassy compound. Generally the ambassador and a few other people lived in the embassy compound. People like myself lived out in the community. The people next door to us were the oil minister for Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast. You see here this wall. Every residence has a wall. On top of the wall, there's shards of glass. If you don't put a wall around your property, squatters will squat on the property. Their law is if the squatters are there for a certain period of time, guess what? You lose the property. So everybody has a wall. Just like we have fences, there are walls. And so you don't really see the house, all you see is the wall. So this is our residence there. You see a lot of colonial residences. This was built by the Dutch This was in the Congo itself, a small country, and if they were fixed up and painted, they would look really nice. But that's during colonialism, this is what they built. And then of course you have your thatched roof, mud brick structure. This is more what you'll see outside of the cities. This is what you'll see inside the cities because they have tin roofs. So they look a little different, a little more substantial. This was taken, these are mud. And this is taken in what you refer to, and you probably have heard this term, Timbuktu. Well, there is a Timbuktu. There really is a Timbuktu. And Timbuktu is in the middle of the desert. And they made these, all the structures in Timbuktu are generally out of mud, straw, and dung. And the sun bakes these things so hard, they're almost like concrete. Now, Timbuktu used to be the educational capital of the Muslim community. And it still has a lot of very rare writings of that time. So it was a real fabulous place at one time. This is something that's surreal. You just cannot understand what this looks like until you see it. This is Our Lady of Peace Basilica in the Ivory Coast in Yamoussoukro. And Yamoussoukro was the capital, is the actual capital of the Ivory Coast, not the business, but the actual capital. And this is where Benin, the president for 32 years, lived. So he decided that he was going to build, and he was Catholic. He was going to build this basilica and started in 1985, finished in 1990. This basilica is the largest church in the world. It seats 7,000 people. Each seat has its own air conditioning portal that blows cold air on you. It has 11,000 standing room. So the Pope accepted this in 1990, accepted this particular structure. That's what it looks like at night. It's a beautiful, beautiful building, stained glass, 20 feet high from ground to ceiling. It is just, like I said, it's surreal. You come out of the jungle, literally out of the jungle, and there is this structure. You cannot believe it. There is Jim, my son, my partner, Addie, which is right here. That's the lady that worked for us, and a young fellow that we sponsored to go to school. Public schools are provided free, with the exception of books and clothes. So if you have books and clothes, you can go to school. If you don't go to school. So this is the structure that I refer to. Is just surreal. It's unbelievable. The people of West Africa are extremely colorful. Very colorful. They're friendly. They're accepting. And let me tell you, as a Caucasian, I don't think anything about being in this crowd, because I look around and I see other Caucasians. But when you go to Africa, you're on the other side of the coin now. You are the minority, and you look around and you see things differently. You see things differently through different eyes. It is different, but they are accepting and friendly. That's more than I can say for a lot of our people here. They are, as I said earlier, with the railroad ties and the lines and the electric wires, etc., being taken up, they are technology deprived. They do not know about things that we take for granted. Some of these folks have never seen computers. They most all right now have seen cell phones. But the things that we just take for granted, they don't understand. I'm going to give you an example of this. Addie, the lady that you saw on the screen there that helped us with our house help, she and Stefan sat down one day and watched a movie called Babe. Does everybody remember Babe? It was about the pigs that talked and the animals and everything. It was one of the sort of the first of those type of films they had back in the 90s. And we watched, they watched a video. And there were the pigs talking and doing these things. And after the video, Addie said, Mom, called her Mom, call me Dad. Mom, do the animals still talk in America? Because she believed what she saw on that video. She thought that was how it was here. Technology deprived. Smart, very smart, very smart. Entrepreneurial, unbelievable. You don't see many people in Kansas City when you go downtown selling you a cigarette. But they sell cigarettes, not packages, cartons, but one cigarette. You can buy one cigarette. They go walk around, cigarette, one cigarette. Water. They put water that you can drink in baggies, seal it up, and sell that bag of water. Instead of bottled water, you have a bag of water. Because water is potable water. Water you can drink is scarce over there. It's even scarcer for people like us because that water in that bag we couldn't drink. But they can because their system is adopted to that. They have a saying. I used to get so irritated when the local guard would take our vehicle out to do something and then we'd be walking back in the gate. And I'd say, Pascal, what's the problem? And he said, vehicle stop, truck stop. And I said, well, why? He said, God's will, God's will. And I said, did God check the gas gauge? Yeah. They never, as long as a truck, this is the problem with machinery there. For a lot of Africans, they will drive it until it runs out of gas or the motor stops. They don't change the oil. They seldom put gas in or do maintenance on things. And that's why they don't understand that. To them, it's God's will. And I guess that's okay. Each country is different. We, as Americans, think nothing or very little of Africa. We just don't have an African presence in our mind. If I said Poland, England, Germany, Ireland, we would all be raising hands. When I say Ghana, Togo, Mali, you went, where? Where? I was the same way. When they said I was going to the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, I said, where in the world is that? I had no idea what countries were and the people were and the history, and Africa has a rich, rich history where they were. I'll point out a couple of things here. Notice the little baby right there. She's holding this baby with this cloth wrapped around her. We do that sometimes here now, a little different carrier. This dress is made out of one piece of material. They sell these already pre-cut. You don't go into the cloth shop to wherever and you buy this, that, or the other. You just go in there, it's all already folded, and you just buy it. And you wrap it around you, and that's it. Now, she has cut out the arms here, but other than that, that's how it is. Now, Africans from different countries can be recognized by their dress, by their head wear, and also by their facial scars. They, as an example, Burkina Faso files their teeth to points. Very scary looking, very Halloweenish. But also some others will put tribal markings on their face, cuts. And these cuts are scars and they stay permanently. So you can see the people and judge sometimes what area, what locality, what country they're from. Very colorful, very colorful. Each of these ladies has a different color on, and perhaps the life they lead, this is the best part of their life, is getting dressed in the morning with a very colorful dress. You notice this is where they grind their millet, right there. There's a little pedestal and mortar. No bathtub. Hot water? No. No hot water. Throughout Africa, except for the larger cities, you will only have one tap, cold water. You get used to it. Take a shower in cold water. It's not that ice cold, it's just cold until you get in it for about 2 minutes and then, hey, it's okay. but that's how it is. So this young fella here is taking a bath, I guess soaking, I guess we would say. So that's the norm. Now remember, I said this is not the city I'm showing you, this is the rest of Africa that you probably wouldn't see on a tour. Again, this is a market, roadside market, and there's a couple things I want to point out to you. One, you see all these pineapples. Africa is a very rich country in soil. They can grow just about anything that you can drop on the ground. If it's a seed, it'll start to grow. The problem with this, the problem is transportation and refrigeration. People grow things, but they cannot get it to the market fast enough in the quantities to make a lot of money because there's not any highways, railroads, with few exceptions, and there's no refrigeration to keep it. So that's the problem. But I never, in the areas that I had, I saw no one starving. There was always plenty to eat because they can grow a lot there. Now, they do have plantations there. Palm oil, coconuts, coffee, and chocolate. Again, these are different. You notice their headscarves, headwear is different. This is up in the Mali area where they dress a little different, and their patterns on their dresses are also different. Industry, fishing, agriculture, mining, and as I said, entrepreneurial. Now, I didn't put one thing on there, I did put it mining, but I wanted you to know that, have you ever seen the film called Blood Diamond?
Yes.
You see Blood Diamond. That is a very good representation of Africa and what goes on there. Diamonds, Blood Diamond, was filmed, or at least supposed to represent, a part of Africa that I had. And they would use water, like hoses. And they would just hit a cliff and wash it away and the diamonds would roll out and they would get it. So mining is not necessarily digging a hole, but it's mining for diamonds. And that's how they would do it. Fishing, the same method that's been used since Christ was around, or before. Mostly for local. Mostly for local. Now, what is this? It's a big fish. Anybody have any idea what that really is? We're very close to that time that we're going to be used something like that. What? A kite. No, it's a coffin. This is Papa Doc's Coffin Shop in Ghana, in Accra, Ghana. Papa Doc. And Papa Doc, because of the way they believe, now about 20 to 30% in the Ghana, Ivory Coast, or neighboring countries, Togo, are Christians, and about 40% are animists, and then the rest are Muslim. So they believe, not really believe, but they think that if you're a fisherman, when you die, you should be buried in a fishing casket. So not just a regular casket. You go to Papa Doc, and Papa Doc will say, well, what kind of fish do you want? You say, well, I want a sailfish, or I want a bass, or whatever. And he'll make this. Now, where do we get involved with this? In 1995, we offered these through Neiman Marcus, and they used them as bars. This top would open up, and they modified it before you got it, and you could put this there and have a little stand, and you set this on there, and you flip this open, and there you could have any kind of a coffin you wanted, but it was really a bar that you could use. And Neiman Marcus offered these for sale. Now, I just read in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago that we are now starting to do the same thing. If one of your relatives, a friend, pass on, and they're a hunter, big hunter, not to be interned in a regular casket, but to have an antler and a deer painted on the casket. So when they are set in the ground, the last thing everybody's going to look at is that, deer or whatever on the casket.
One each.
Out of the 1.6 million people that get caskets every year, a lot of them now are choosing to have a casket very similar. So Papa Doc was a forerunner in doing this. And it's really, like I said, they're entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial. Anybody have any idea what that is? It goes back to the Bible.
Rice patty.
What is it?
Is it a rice patty?
Not rice patty, but it looks that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What do you have on your table?
Salt.
Salt. Salt water is put in here, and after the sun bakes it, they recoup the salt, and that's how they get their salt for some countries. So, again, things that we don't normally see and we just take for granted. We take so much for granted. Our plumbing, our electricity, our water, our roads, and the salt on the table. We take for granted. They have to work for it. There's an open market, and I'll point a couple things out to you. This is the meat section over here. All open air. Now one day I was at the open market, the marché, walking down there, and I looked down sort of an aisle because you have people on either side, and some are in the center like this. And I saw sort of a table was looked kind of like almost moving, but it was gray. And I got a little closer, and the guy went, and the flies all went off, and there was the meat. But they don't think anything about that. I guess if you cook your food, it doesn't make any difference. So you see a lot of fresh vegetables there. Like I said before, canned goods. You always see canned goods, things like this, and you see medicine. We now have policies or procedures in Kansas City, I'm sure, where you can take your expired prescription medicine and give it to somebody and they just dispose of it, as opposed to just flushing it down the toilet or throwing it away. When you go buy medicine, you always check the expiration date. Almost always it's expired because that's where they get their medicine. Think about it. So, that's the open market. This, anybody tell me what they think this is? Antlers, right? Okay, that's good. And what kind of a market do you think this is? Who said that? You're pretty correct. This is a voodoo market in Togo. Now, that's not going to really, like, oh yeah, I remember they taught us that in school. Yeah, I remember Togo. I tell you, I always wanted to go to Togo. It doesn't work like that. Togo in World War I was a German possession. The settlement in World War I, Togo reverted to the French. Okay? Togo is the home of voodoo. That's where it originated from. The slaves that went from Togo to the Caribbean took that with them. From the Caribbean to New Orleans, South Carolina. So this is the voodoo market. This is just a small table. This is a this is a shopping center voodoo market. It is very large. This is what they sell, and they do sell medicinal things. They grind up and they sell for different problems. Now, I said fishing, commercial fishing. A lot of Japanese ships are off the coast of Africa, West Africa, the horn that goes around, the big bubble, the ice cream bubble that comes around like this. Really strong storms that are there. And these fishing vessels are beached on the beach here. Mauritania, which is one of the largest countries in Africa, it's right there on the big bubble. It's almost all desert, almost all desert. Every mile or so you see a ship like this on the beach because they've been washed on the beach. They've blown on the beach. Almost all of our hurricanes originate in that area and then are going westward to the U.S. So that's why it's a very volatile, seasonal storm area, and this is why these ships are like that. Now, they just let them sit there and they rust. After they're all stripped off of everything they can take off of them, That's it. This is an upside down cow. This is a cow, and believe me, there's not any fat on their bodies. It's almost all meat. Now, they take all the hides off and send them up to Spain to make jackets, furniture, and other things, especially for the Europeans. And of course, like I said, you have to add oil. If you're going to make hamburger, you have to add oil to the meat, otherwise it just falls apart because there's no fat to bind it together. Animals in West Africa. Everybody said, a lot of people would tell me when I would come back here, I said, well, did you see all those animals? I said, well, I would go to the zoo if you want to see an animal. They've eaten them all. They've shot them. They've poached them. They've taken them for medicinal purposes. They've taken them for voodoo, curses, and other things. And I'll show you why in a minute. So there are not many, I'm talking animals in West Africa, not talking about South Africa. We're talking about West Africa. So, not many animals left. Not many game animals left. And I found out why the farmers don't like elephants. Elephants are migratory. They come up from West Africa, from South Africa, they come up to the sort of Central Africa during the winter, and they just don't know any boundaries. So if a farmer just did his field, they just walk 100 elephants will go right through this field to the village, trample everything down. If I was a farmer, I would be outraged. I would probably be killing all the elephants because they've destroyed my livelihood generally sometimes for a whole year because I have to wait to plant my crop again. Jane Goodall's gorilla orphanage, I visited that frequently. That is down in south part of my area in the Congo. The chimpanzee rehabilitation, that's a different area. This is a chimpanzee. Now, rehabilitation, I mean, what do we mean by that? Well, this is how it goes. These are really cute little critters. It's like a little puppy. You know, you get the little puppy and you like it, and you know this is great, and all of a sudden the puppy grows into a horse. What do you do with it? I don't want it anymore. It's tearing everything up. Well, this is the way a chimpanzee is. They don't get that big, but they're very strong, and they can become very violent, and you have to keep them in a cage, and you have to feed them. Feed them? Well, wait a minute. I need food too, so that means they're competing for my food, so they let them go out in the wild, and they know nothing of what to do because they've never been in the wild. So, Sierra Leone and the European Union came up with a rehabilitation program, and they have a camp there. That's where I was, and they rehabilitate the chimpanzees.
Like, where are you?
Very, very smart animals. Very smart. Probably smarter than some of the people I know. But they're very smart, and they work with them to make sure that they can rejoin their other chimpanzees in the wild. Now, this photo here is with a gorilla. Now, the gorilla is not in the white. The gorilla is down here. I didn't want you to get confused. This is the gorilla, not here. So, we would go down to the Jane Goodall Gorilla Orphanage, and we would check out a couple of gorillas. And these gorillas are what they call juvenile, more teenager type equivalent gorillas. These gorillas are taken at very small ages when their parents are murdered. They're shot, they're poached for hands, for feet, and for other body parts for the voodoo. And they just left the rest of them there. So now you have this little gorilla. This is wandering around, going to starve to death because it doesn't know how to take care of itself. Maybe hasn't even been finished nursing yet. And so they bring it to the orphanage, and Jane Goodall will raise this gorilla. And it goes in phases like this. The gorilla comes in, and a local is assigned to the gorilla and paid to do this. The local, generally it's a lady, comes in and will take the gorilla and nurture it and hold it and walk around with it and work with it. And the gorilla grows up. And this lady does this every day. And then as the gorilla gets a little bigger, they take them out and they walk them around. Now that's what we're doing. We checked out a couple of gorillas and they were like tackle football. That's what they would do. They'd run around and they come up and tackle you and grab you, you know, because that was they're playing with you. They're playing with you. And then as they get a little older, they take them out in the jungle in an area that's secure, and they'll let them stay a couple of nights out there. They come and check on them. And then that progresses where they take them out even farther and let them stay there forever so they can be returned to the wild. These are silverback gorillas. So that's what the deal is on that. This is a voodoo market where some of your animals are killed and go. Again, you can see all the skulls there, and each one of those represent an animal. Skin of an animal, and they've already eaten the animal, but they sell the skin. Everyday life in West Africa is hard. We have it so easy here. So easy. Everything has to be done by hand for the most part, and every day is day by day. Not month by month or week by week, by day by day. What is this? It's a laundromat. That's exactly right. That's a laundromat. And they lay your clothes out to dry. That is the laundry right here. These are stations. Each tire is a station. You see them out there now, and they're doing laundry. They will take it and lay it out and let it dry. It only takes probably less than 15 minutes, and that stuff is dry. But up the road, they're washing vehicles in the same water. And farther up the road, there's probably some animals or a herd of buffalo or cows that are doing their thing in the water. So the water just sort of washes down. Don't think a thing about it. But this is how they do a lot of things in Africa. It's not the same. There's no area to put a quarter in to get your washing machine to go. This is up north in Mali. Everything they own is on this cow. The cow, that's the tent they have right there, the boughs for the tent, and there's a little kid there, and there's a lady, and got a pot there, and some other things. There's a bunch of them here, just a line of them, and they're going and they're moving. They're nomadic. They're nomadic. They don't stay in one place very long. Nomadic. Different than the people that are in the southern part of West Africa. This is a well right here. Well, this is corn, and this is a well, and right there is a rubber tire that's been fashioned into a pot, a bucket that goes down in the well and comes back up with the water. That's how they get their water. You got to go from point A to point B. You got to get the boat. Now, do you think that boat is overloaded? I'll have to check the Coast Guard to find out, but I'm pretty sure it is. And you read about this occasionally where they have boats that are so overloaded that they just capsize. And that happens occasionally there too. That reminded me of a story. A true story. I was on a plane going to Cameroon. Well, actually, I was going from Cameroon back to my home in the Ivory Coast. It was a little 2-engine prop plane. Kind of a puddle jumper, we call it here. So maybe you go to Topeka, you might get on one of these, or maybe even Chicago from here. Not a jet. And the engines are both running. And the air conditioning, it's air conditioning. The plane is full. I get on the plane. I sit down. It's a fairly new plane. And I'm over at the back of the plane, but I can see out of the front hatch. And I see the guy's going like this, and he's got this thing in front. That was his ticket. Because they always sell more tickets than they got seats. So it's first come, first served. So this fellow, this flight attendant, he goes inside, he looks around, and he takes the guy, and he brings him in. And he sets him in his seat. The jump seat there. The kind that folds up against the wall. Okay, fine. He goes back outside. There's another guy doing the same thing. He's guys were together. So he goes in and looks around, brings him in, opens the restroom door, puts him inside. Okay, bang, fine. He goes back out, and there's one more guy just doing this. So he goes in, he walks up and down the aisle, and in the back of the plane, they had like a school bus, where you have a seat that goes all the way across the plane. And there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seats. No aisle because it's the end of the plane. So he's back there, he's looking around, comes back out, guy comes on, takes him, and he says, Monsieur, Monsieur. He goes back to the back here, he's talking to this fellow, and he says, Monsieur, you must take your seatbelt off and form a collage. So the guy sits on his lap, and they put the seatbelt around each other. He goes back up, closes the hatch, and the plane takes off. Now, what am I thinking? Well, this is what I was thinking. A couple of months before this, a plane had taken off from Cameroon and it crashed in the mango swamp. Now, it didn't kill everybody, but a lot of the people that were going to survive were eaten by crocodiles. Oh. So, this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to eat dinner tonight. Plane took off, we landed. I was thankful that we got off of the plane. I'll tell you one other plane story, and I said planes were not FAA approved. Maybe the pilots weren't FAA approved. I was flying, I don't know, a long flight. It's like going from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., that distance. And, I mean, hey, there's only one plane in the air in Africa at one time. I mean, it's not like we've got hundreds of planes in the air here. So I figured, hey, no problem. So this co-pilot gets out. I sit up front. That's where they sat you. And so I'm sitting there, and he comes out from the cabin, and he's walking around, you know, and doing this and looking, and goes on back. I didn't think anything about it. Well, he's maybe taking too long. So now the pilot gets up, and he walks out. He hasn't gotten very far, and all of a sudden, you hear one of those little air. Guess what happened? The door shut, and now there's nobody flying the plane. The door shut locked. So I'm thinking, well, let's see. This is going to be real interesting. So. This is before we had plastic silverware. They had metal silverware. So one of the airline ladies, she comes up and captain, they talk, and he gets his knife and he's sticking it in there. He's trying to open the door. I didn't even offer to help him, but he's sticking. The door comes open, and he goes inside, and the co-pilot goes inside, and the door shuts, and we land. But that's flying in Africa. You never know. I'll tell you one last thing. We landed in Ghana. It was a nighttime flight, dinner flight. But it was only just to stop to get a few people. We're going to take right back off. We didn't leave. I think, what in the world is going on here? So finally we haven't left any. They handed out the meals. Well, what are you giving us the meals for? Just let us off the plane. We ate the meals, then they let us off the plane. Because we had to eat the meals, otherwise they had to pay for it. So it's just a different way of doing things. So I said this is the last one because this one sticks into my mind. I'm up in the lounge waiting for an airplane to land in Côte d'Ivoire. It's a big airport. Storms, just rain and storm. Rain. They only have one runway in most African airports. Remember, Africa only gets paid, the airport only gets paid if the plane lands. If the plane doesn't land, they don't get any money. So I don't know, maybe it slacked up a little bit. I said, you must be cleared. You may land now. So I guess the guy lands and he slids off, he hydrofoils off the runway into the tarmac, the grass tarmac, and the plane just kind of, stops. No flames, no nothing. The back door opens up. What do you think is supposed to come out when you open the door? The chute. Guess what didn't come out? The chute. Somebody had stolen the chute. Now, we had a marine on that plane, so that's how I know what happened. People were terrified, but that's why they cannot land or don't come to the U.S. because they're not, you know, FAA certified. They don't even have all the parts to the plane. So anyway, that boat reminded me of the story. It's overloaded, and who knows what's going to happen. Now, does anybody know what this is? It's church. That's right. This is our chapel in Côte d'Ivoire, where we went every Sunday, or most every Sunday, and getting ready for service just to start. Very Spartan, no air conditioning, and the Mass was said in French. So that's how it is. Again, going from one place to the other, that's a typical boat. Sometimes roads, bridges, wash out, but a lot of times this is how you do it. You just get from one place to the other. You're waiting to go. A person here, this young fella, has a hard life ahead of him. And if we can help him, we should. In conclusion, I helped, assisted, arranged for evacuation of 4 different countries. I traveled over 250 days a year. Africa's problems can only be solved by Africans. The first thing we want to do, generally, you and I, what do we want to do when we get to a hut? You need a toilet. You got to have indoor plumbing. Well, they don't see it that way. But that's our mindset. So Africans have to solve their own problems. Can only be solved by Africans, but we must assist them in solving their problems. In other words, support their ideas and their way of solving that problem. Colonialism did Africa no favors. I assure you, no favors. Africa is rich in minerals, human potential, and certainly culture, which we don't think about, but it is. Get to know African culture. You'll be surprised. Every day in my book, in my life at that time, was a National Geographic Day. I saw things that you only see in National Geographic. In conclusion, it was an assignment of a lifetime. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to pay you for the answer. I have a lot of money right here. These are all $5 bills. How many rolls of toilet paper does a family of 2 need for 2 years?
None. Yeah, that's all.
No. Remember, you got to think American now, not African.
Oh, American?
Oh.
This is an American family for 2 with a sit-down commode.
200.
How many?
200.
Oh,
350.
that's a pretty good guess, but
How many? Okay.
this is, now remember, this is single ply, not 2 ply.
Is this expensive good toilet paper or cheap stuff?
Cheap stuff.
Oh, okay.
350.
No, she was closer. Anybody else? No.
235.
Lower.
225.
220.
Lower.
210. 215, 25.
150.
One.
150.
195.
Who said 150?
Yes.
Here's your $5 right there.
Oh, boy, you can buy a lot of toilet paper.
Now,
Talking about what the government
Oh
says
my
in the
gosh.
real world.
this is what your wife
You
said.
gotta move.
This is Liberian money,
Thank you.
and it's worthless.
It's very beautiful.
But I will say that Liberia just had an election, and for the first time in Liberian history had a turnover without any problems. From the lady that had the presidency, an educator, to a gentleman that won the election. She did not run, but this is good. So now we have Liberia and we have Ghana that have had 2 almost back-to-back elections without any problem. So there is hope. There is hope for Africa and the countries in Africa, and I do not put South Africa in that bailiwick. I do not put South Africa in that bailiwick. only the West African countries I'm talking about. So those people have turned over, and we are thankful here in the United States that they are following our democratic process. Does anybody know how Liberia was established?
American slaves.
American slaves, that's right. Do you know the capital of Liberia? And that's the only capital outside of the United States named for a president, Monrovia, President Monroe. Anyway, get to know your African history. I thank you very much. And let's see here. I got one last slide. Any questions?
No, look at this.
Any questions at all?
What period of time were used?
1995 to 1997.
Is French the predominant language?
There are two countries over there that played a big key role. England, of course, Anglophone, and Francophone, which is French. Most are French countries. The French did nobody any favors. When they left, they tore everything up. The telephone exchange, the electrification, was they just took it away. They either destroyed it or just left with it. The English actually had trained people to run these, and when they left in a much better order. So those countries are much better off. But that is correct. French is the predominant over there. Ma'am, you had a question. You had your hand up.
You mentioned that they had trains at one time, and then when the trains were no longer, the Africans decided that they could use the tracks. What did they use them for?
They would melt them down and make things. Believe me, they are entrepreneurial. They will make things. They will make. I was in a small area, a little village, and they had this fire going. This guy's got this air pump. He's bellows. He's doing this. And I went over, and they had taken all the Vicks jars that had the cobalt blue glass, and they were melting those down. And when I say melt, they were almost as soft like dough. And then they would put holes in them, and they made beads out of those and sell them on the market. Now, when you go there, nothing is thrown away. Nothing. Even the newspapers are taken and used as wrapping paper for everything. And bottles. If you want peanuts, you get a bottle. You get a fifth with peanuts in it. They put the peanuts in there, and that's how they sell their peanuts. They reuse that container for different things. So they're entrepreneurial, and that's just how they do it. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was in West Africa in the 70s.
You were? Where were you?
All over.
Good.
Anyhow, Martin, we've prepared, our secretary has prepared for you a book of memories for your years at Paseo.
Thank you.
And also we have for you an award, a Remember Who You Are award. Thank you very much for you.